Welcome back, everybody. I have the distinct pleasure of speaking to Warner Loughlin, a acclaimed acting teacher, an actress herself who became an acting teacher. You know a ton of her famous clients, and we'll dive into that a little bit later. But what I wanted to do is or the reason why I'm so excited about this is because I finally have somebody who I can talk shop to. The whole point of this series is because of the love of acting. It's because it allows us to bring on and speak to people who understand acting, who live acting, who are in different parts of the acting path, and for us to learn from them, to get inspired by them, and to make our own paths easier. And I really, really, really love your method. And here's the book. We're going to link everything to it. And I reference it all the time. As a matter of fact, when I was getting ready for the interview, I went to get it. There's a bookcase, in the back of me right there. Right. Okay. No. And I went, and that's where it usually is. And I couldn't find it. I'm like, no, I can't believe it. And I ran around the whole house looking for it for about a half an hour. I almost gave up and almost went to Amazon to buy another copy. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it one more look where it's supposed to be. And then it presented itself where I looked 15 times right before that, and it didn't show. So, but as we get to why I really appreciate your method, I want to give people an idea of when we're talking about the tortured artist and we're talking about the tortured actor. And probably, one of the reasons why actors need therapy is because of what they go through to get to a point where they can utilize something that you created. So if you don't mind, let's create our own actor backstory where we go through some of the the paths that it takes to get to become an actor, and go through a little bit so those who are actors who will recognize this will appreciate it. Those who are not actors and are interested in what we have to go through will start to have an understanding of what this path takes. When we're young and we're kids and we act just because it's fun, because it's imagination, because, hey, I pretend to be somebody else and I'm going to go and do that. And it's fun and it's awesome. And then we get to watch movies. And we watch movies and we see these incredible actors. And we want to be like them. So we at some point decide, yes, that's me. That's what I want to do. And then with that enthusiasm, with that open heart, we go and we start studying. And then we get to the mess that we're about to explain. So let's start with the man who shares, my first name or my given name, Konstantin. When I was born in Ukraine, that was my name. Konstantin Stanislavski, who kind of started this whole thing. So if you were to put it in just a few words, his approach and kind of the summary of what he was trying to do, what would that be? And then we'll kick off with that.
First of all, thank you for reading the book, Alan. I appreciate that so much.
You're welcome.
It was literally written to try to hopefully help actors move away from the idea of using our own past tragedies and hurts and whatnot. Interesting, Stanislavski. There's a book, and goodness knows, remember the name of it.
Yeah, I have it here. An Actor Prepares.
Yeah. There's the book I'm talking about is it's about this thick, and it's fascinating. I mean, it's like War and Peace side, but it's fascinating. But in this book, it explains Stanislavski and the group theater back in the day. We had the group theater with Lee Strasberg, Sandy Meisner, Stella Adler, and all of those people. And the reason that we have so many diverse thoughts of acting these days is because they all got in a huge, humongous fight. Because they're like, no, I think Stanislavski meant that. No, I think he meant that. No, I think he meant that.
Yeah.
Apparently, as rumor has it, Lee Strasberg, who I studied with for a good bit back in my young days, method. We'll get to that, right?
Yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah. I think Lee and Stella had a really big falling out, and she went over to Paris on his deathbed and spoke to him for about 6 weeks. And he's like, no, 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 no. This is not what I meant. So, you know, you've got many schools of thought who think they know what Stanislavski is. Were all those people back in the day wrong? Not necessarily. It's just that we know more about how emotion works, how the human brain works. And also, if you think about it, back when those old school acting methods were formed, we didn't have electricity sometimes, you know, there weren't cars, with certainly no television, right? Certainly no moving pictures even.
Yep.
So it's difficult to apply old school thought to the new mediums. And it's time that our schools of thought kind of caught up to the working world that we deal with today.
Yeah. And it's again, we'll kind of dive back into it. So people, when they hear Stanislavski or Adler or Meisner, we give them a little, you know, kind of explanation of what those are. And to me, it's interesting that even though, you know, the ideas of Stanislavski have been created so long ago, and we didn't have movies then, we had completely different stage acting then, and that's what he was kind of fighting against. That's why he created his own methods. It's interesting that they're still being taught. They're still being taught, and that's where a lot of the confusion comes in, because, you know, at a basis. And I think as we talk about these methods, let's kind of put them into different categories. And the categories that I would like to use, and please fix it if you don't like it, but the categories that kind of made sense to me is be yourself, be completely different from who you are, be somebody else, or be somebody in the middle, right? So does that make sense? Can we use those categories, or would you like to use something else?
Makes total sense.
Okay.
Makes total sense. I'm more of it's kind of a melding of the two, because
Yes.
you creating the character. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so Stanislavski kind of started this whole thing. Then we had Strasberg, who said, okay, ooh, I really like this whole idea of emotional memory, which is what we call method, right? It's the get in touch with the pain or the happiness in your own experience, and then use that as the character. I rebel against that because I've tried it. It's very painful. It's when I'm doing it, and you know, stage acting versus screen acting. In stage acting, you have beginning through the end, and then you start over. In screen acting, you have 50 different shot types. You have 100 different takes, and you have to repeat it over and 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 over again. And you have to stop because they have to reset the stage, or not the stage, but they have to reset the the whatever is on the scene. They have to change the camera. You're going out, then you have to come right back in. You have to get back into that character. It's a huge energetic, physical, psychological, and all drain. And when I tried to use that, you know, I had a scene where I was crying because I just found out that my daughter committed suicide. I'm a father. I have a daughter. Okay, easy. I can just go into my daughter. How do I feel about my daughter? I love her. Do I find out that she just committed suicide? I'm going to be very emotional. Well, you're very emotional, and it's very raw, and it's wonderful. Take one, and maybe take two, and then how do you keep that fresh? It's like, aside from it being just very traumatic, it's also, I didn't find it to be very usable to do take after take after take and continue to have that same weight. So method and the ability to use that emotional kind of memory, to me, did not work. But I think if we were to say that that's what Lee Strasberg was saying, it's, you know, kind of based on an emotional memory, or, you know, would you say something else?
I think you're exactly right. That's the way I was heavily trained when I was younger, because that's the way most people are trained, right?
Okay.
It wasn't until I got to LA and I realized, oh my, oh my, I've got to do it again and again and again and again, because you're going to dry up. And that's just our human nature's way of protecting our psyches, because we are meant to experience tragedies and then we heal from them. We're not meant to revisit and revisit and revisit. Some people argue, well, that's cathartic, right? But really, you're asking for the pain to be present again.
Yeah.
In my mind. And in television and in film, where you literally have to do that emotion over and over again, you'll dry up, because your mind goes, don't go there, don't feel that pain. That's human nature. It's our survival instinct.
Yeah. Okay, so we're kind of like, so again, if we're putting it in the category of be yourself, be completely different from yourself, or the middle, where would you say, Strasberg is?
I would say he's be yourself, because you're using, here's the thing, here's another problem I have with it. You're going back into your own life. So what happens at that point? You're trying to be in two places at one time. You're trying to be in the scene. You're trying to go back in your life. You're trying to remember a memory, whether that be, triggered by a smell or whatnot. Bring up that emotion and then apply it to the scene at hand. But it doesn't always work that way. It doesn't always apply to the scene at hand. I can literally watch an actor and go, that's a method actor, that's a Meisner actor, you can see it. I don't ever want someone to look at an actor and be able to know what their technique is. I want them to look at an actor and go, wow, that really moved me. I was so with that character. I would be horrified if anybody ever said, oh, that's a Warner Loughlin actor. That would be horrific.
Okay, I understand that. And I agree with you. It's that's the other part that once you're in the acting business, if you will, and you kind of watch other people on screen, and you're like, okay, I get it. And then you watch somebody like Mark Rylance in Bridge of Spies, and you're like, okay,
yeah, he's
got
amazing.
it. That's what I want. Okay, so we have Stella Adler. Stella said, no, I don't want the emotional memory. It's not a good and healthy way to go. And Stanislavski, like you mentioned, his deathbed was saying, no, that's not what I meant. And Stella said, no, we're going to go in a different direction. And we're going to use imagination. Like it. Okay, so if we were to kind of, say Stella did this, what would a few words describe it as such?
I think she was big on imagination, which was a good thing, right? But again, we're dealing a lot in theater.
Yeah.
I think in those days we just didn't know how to get deeper. That's the only problem I have with Stella Adler's technique. And also the idea of actions and intentions.
Yes.
As human beings, we don't walk around thinking of actions. We're just feeling something. We're just knee-jerk reacting to something. Yeah. So, and we are the people we are, right? We don't walk in a room and go, my intention is to make that guy love me. We don't. The interesting thing is how we go about making that guy love me right there, and why. Yeah. What in our past caused us to feel that way and to seek to do that, but we don't consciously think of that throughout our lives as we're walking around day to day.
Yeah, which brings in shirtless and brings in some of the other things which we'll untangle in a bit. Okay, so we have Stella. Let's put her in the category of be yourself, be somebody else, be a mix.
I think so, yeah.
So which one would she be out of those three?
With Stella, I think she was big in the imagination world.
Yeah, so be someone else.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. Right.
People may argue with me on that, but
I'm okay with this. As a matter of fact, I would love for this to generate kind of self-inquiry, discovery, and a discussion, and lots of comments saying, no, that's not what she meant, and this is what it meant, and this is how I applied it. Great. The whole point of this is to help actors. So I appreciate you sticking with this.
My pleasure.
As we get to the backstory. Okay, we have another a Russian actor, Michael Chekhov. And Chekhov, from my understanding of it, I haven't studied him a lot. My understanding is he said, no, I don't necessarily want to go emotional response. I want to use imagination. I want to use physicality. I want to get to archetypes, and I want to kind of start invoking the subconscious aspects of it. So I'll use physicality in order to kind of get in there, and stuff is going to come out naturally. And instead of using my past experience, I will use an archetype of somebody who I know. And there are all sorts of archetypes that we use in psychology. So would that be a correct way of explaining what he did?
I think so.
Yeah.
Interesting. I had a teacher way back in the day, Sonya Moore,
Mm-hmm.
who was a big believer in your spine created the emotion and whatnot. I didn't find it to be as helpful to do archetypes, and my spine was, because it made me focus not on the character and the circumstances, but it made me focus. It put me in my head.
Yep.
And I think when we're acting, we don't want to be watching ourselves. We want to be embracing the character. We want to know everything we can know about the character, and literally focusing on the other actor rather than ourselves. Because if we're in our head, we're looking for, ooh, did I make that? Did I do that beat correctly? Am I in it? Oh no, I've lost it. Oh, now I'm up. Now I don't know what to do. Oh no, and your third eye starts watching yourself and critiquing yourself, and we're not acting when we're in our left brain. We act in our right brain, right?
And try, on top of that, try to get the lights and the blocking, and making sure that, oh, did I do this particular gesture in that take? Oops, I have to repeat that gesture. So you're in your head, you're trying to focus on making sure that you remember your lines on the 15th take. All of these things just make acting even more complex than it has to be. Let's put Chekhov in a category, and then we'll move on to what you naturally kind of described into Meisner, Sanford Meisner. But
I'm not sure what category to put a Chekhov in.
I don't either, and I think because he's saying move away from emotional kind of memory and go into archetype, it seems to be like, because he's saying use your own physicality, but we're trying to evoke the subconscious, it's not really yourself. So it's some breeding of a mix between the two. So let's put him there.
Let's put him there. That sounds good.
In that category.
Yeah.
Okay. Meisner. Meisner is somebody who I found actually very useful, because as you can tell by me asking all these silly questions, I am highly analytical and I'm in my head. Which improv, by the way, helped with of getting me out of my head. But with Meisner, it made me realize that, oh, okay, I don't have to be here at all. I just have to be there. And Meisner said you need to be with the other person in the scene. It's based on them that your reaction will come, and your reaction is going to come naturally, because if they're angry at you and you see that in their eyes, you're going to feel some way about it. And you don't have to, it takes you out of the pre-planning, takes you out of all of these things, because then you can be natural in your response and be in a scene with that other person. And it made me a much better actor by studying the Meisner techniques. Some people don't like them because they think that it's weird in the way that they approach it. I found it actually very free. So Meisner kind of went the other way of saying it's not about you, it's not about creating character, it's about being in a relationship with the person who's across from you. So am I correct in the kind of that assessment?
Yeah, and I think there, from each different method out there, I think it's useful for people to glean what they can glean, put that in your toolbox and use it in some way, right? Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly with popping your focus to the other actor, and that act of listening. I often say it's about taking rather than giving, because some schools of thought go give to the other actor, but think of the concept of taking instead. In other words, you're taking in what that person is saying, right? Or that actor is saying, that character is saying. Mm-hmm. In terms of reacting a split second because of what that other actor is doing, Warner's reaction may be entirely different than the character's reaction. Yep. That's why I think that it's helpful to do emotion with detail, which I'm not sure we have time to get into and here, whatever, but to really embrace the character so that you're reacting appropriately. I'm a huge believer in improv because it teaches you so many things. Above and beyond all, maybe, perhaps, is the idea that you have to take, because if you're not taking an improv, you're playing on a different playing field. Yeah. So you must listen intently and you must react immediately and, yes and all the yummy things in improv. I love improv. Yep. Love improv. It also teaches you not to squash an impulse. But hopefully that impulse will be from the character's point of view rather than your own personal point of view.
Yeah. And we absolutely are going to be getting to your method. I wanted people to understand why your method works well and why they can take all of the stuff that we've been filing in our acting cabinets for years and trying to figure it out, because we have, and we'll kind of circle back in a second, but what we have is a cacophony of voices. We have people, and we have incredible actors who've won Oscars, like Billy Bob Thornton, who basically said, I've gotten so much praise for playing all these incredibly diverse characters, but my secret is it's just me. It's all these different aspects of myself that I just play and associate with. Then you have Jeremy Irons, who what kind of piqued my interest because of how I'm wired. He said, well, I look at a character and I look at them from the chakra perspective. What chakra are they on? And chakras are the energy centers. And you have the 7 centers from the bottom to the top, and you have completely different characteristics and physicality and energy of that person. So he plays from that. So you have people, casting directors who I've taken workshops with, who are basically saying, look, when you're doing commercials or you're doing co-stars or you're doing a lot, basically most of the acting, it's just you. They only want you. They don't want you to create a character. They don't want anything. Just be yourself. And then you have other people saying, absolutely not. You don't create, you're not yourself. You have to create a character. So we have all of this cacophony from people who we respect, people who we admire, all saying different things. We have no idea what we're doing. And when it gets to a set, and then you have to do blocking on top of that, remember your lines, everybody else in the scene, and you're in who knows what headspace. This is why we need therapy. And that's why I like your method, because when I started reading it, I started understanding, okay, this is simple, and this allows me to use my analytical brain first, and then it allows me to use my imagination next, and then I can incorporate some of the other aspects and just be and relax and have fun again, instead of thinking and figuring things out and what part of what method I apply here, and it's agony. So what we'll do, kind of to get to your method, is we'll Shirtlift and everybody else kind of linked in so people can find out more about them. But let's get to you. As you mentioned, you started with Strasberg. You started with the method. You saw that that pain was not necessarily suitable for you, so you started creating your own method. Now let's talk about yours and the fundamentals of it and why it works so well for so many people that we know and admire.
Thank you. Ask away. I'm an open book.
So, again, this is a fabulous book, and I really want everybody to read it. If you're serious about acting, and it's not just applicable to acting, I think it's applicable to a lot of aspects of our life, but you should read it. If we were to kind of take the Warner Loughlin technique and to dilute it to simple steps. Step one, and I'm going to shut up as much as I can, which is hard for me, as people know. But step one to set you off would be, when you're looking at a script, don't start making decisions. Just look at the facts first. You call it your givens. Please expand on that before we go into step two.
The technique really, in the process of the technique, if you think about it, you want to go from very broad and general down to uber specifics.
Yep.
So we just start with the givens of the script.
Yeah.
Who is this character we're about to dive into? I'm a big believer in character first. So you want to discover who is this person living within these circumstances of the script. So we start with the givens. Is she or he married, divorced, has 3 kids, is a bachelor, is a hooker, is whatever the character might be, and the given circumstances of the character. Is this a coke addict? Is this a neurosurgeon? Is this so we look at the givens. Mm-hmm. Next we go into the hows of behavior. How is this character behaving? But more importantly, in the face of what? Under what circumstances? Yeah. For instance, does this character behave dismissively when faced with confrontation? Mm-hmm. We go through, and this is in the analytical stage, we go through the process of examining how the character behaves in the face of what. And then we ask ourselves, perhaps because why? And we get bigger overall issues, such as, ooh, this character, it feels like he might have been bullied when he was younger. Or, ooh, this character might have been a superstar athlete when he was younger. But we have reasons for coming to these sorts of ideas, not just superfluously, mm-hmm. pulling it out of the air, like, this guy's a football player, this guy's a rock star, We've come to those conclusions because we've looked at the hows of behavior and we've looked at the patterns of behavior, because we as people have patterns of behavior. If you look at your wife, I'm sure there are patterns of behavior. I'm sure there's things she says about you, like, oh, you do this all the time, right?
Yeah, just 5 minutes before we started talking, absolutely.
Right. So we are creatures of patterns of behavior, and those patterns of behavior can give you enormous clues as to what the character's younger life was like. Mm-hmm. We go into that examination of what the younger life was like through what I call core knowledge. It's just basically the history of the character. Mm-hmm. We arrive at what I call the base human emotion. And the base human emotion, I hope this isn't confusing. It's such a nutshell overview of it.
I think so, because again, to kind of take a little step back. So we start with the analytical approach of just, we're not making any decisions. All we're saying is, okay, we're reading the scene. What's in the scene? Where is it? Who are the people involved? What are we noticing about it? Then we get into that. Well, that seems like an odd behavior. He said that, or the way that reacted every time somebody would try to come close to you, the person moved back. Okay. Then we start getting into the why. We're still just playing around. This is still not making any decisions on the character. We're observing. We're writing down. Then we get into in more details where you're saying, your core knowledge and your core history. So it's not confusing. It actually is very logical process in first discovering the character and then using your imagination to enrich the character, and that's where we're going to get to in your next steps.
Exactly. So we've looked at the patterns of behavior, particularly those that repeat themselves. And if you've got several scenes to look at, and even in one scene sometimes, you can see the patterns of behavior starting to repeat themselves. Yeah. Which is always going to be a little clue as to what that character's past was like, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we start building that past in that way to come up with a base human emotion, which is kind of a fun concept that mm-hmm. a lot of people apply to their own lives as well.
Yeah, that's where the psychology comes in, and that's the cool part, because. And that's why I said it's not your book and your method is not just applicable to acting. It's applicable to self-understanding of what is your base human emotion. I kind of went through that, and it made a lot of sense to me of why I'm acting in a certain way, and that you talk about, I'll shut up now, but you'll talk about how to define that base human emotion and when it happens.
So a base human emotion is an overwhelming, overriding emotion that occurs in childhood because of a specific event or a series of events that causes the child to perceive the world in a very unique way. The base human emotion is, if you think of it, it's like, we call it the base human emotion because it lies at the base of the character. And think of it like a springboard. So when I'm teaching people about the base human emotion, not that we use our own life experiences, specific life experiences when we're doing a character, but when I'm teaching an actor about the concept of base human emotion, I always like to say, because it's fun, for a second, just for a split second, think about your own childhood, the earliest memory you can remember, and do you remember it? And they'll take a moment, they'll take a second, and they'll go, yeah. And I say it might be a fleeting moment, it might be seemingly inconsequential, it might mean nothing to you, but think about that. It's just the first memory that pops up in your head. Yeah. Could be innocent, could be traumatic. Doesn't have to be traumatic, right? And if you think about that, I'll often say, was there an emotion involved in that? And more than often people go, no. And I'm like, think about it for a second. Was there?
Yeah, there was.
There was. And I'll say, think about where you were. You know what room you were in, right? Oh, yes, I was here, there. Or no, I was in a car, I was in a park, whatever. And I said, think about what you're wearing. You'll remember it only if it was significant to that moment. Think about what you were eating only if it was significant to that moment. Or what was said to you only if it was significant in that moment. Because we store memories and remember them because of an emotional reason to exist. Yep. If I said, Alan, what happened last June 23rd? You'd probably go, I don't remember it. Yeah. Unless it was your wife's birthday, or you got into a fender bender, or something, or if it was a friend's birthday, something emotionally significant to you, right? Mm-hmm. Yet we still remember these memories of childhood very, very vividly. Mm-hmm. And I say vividly, sometimes they're very fleeting, but we do recall those emotionally significant moments in our lives. So, okay, getting back to the base human emotion, mm-hmm. if you think about that early childhood memory, say, like I say, the first one you can remember, think about what was going on, mm-hmm. and then ask yourself, does that have any significance to my life right now? And very often people go, no. And I'm like, think about it a second. And then you go, oh, yeah. So your base human emotion may or may not lie around that. We look at them, we use them for characters just because they're a springboard for a character to begin.
It's great because that's where the exploration starts. So that's where the imagination work comes in. You get to understand a little bit about the character, you kind of go through their history, and then you say, why are they this way? What was that springboard that made them into this being? And that's where the fun comes in. That's the imagination, and you get to play with it. And like you said, it doesn't have to be that super dramatic moment of Bambi with mother dying. It could be anything. And it's not, you get to that one core, and then as you're kind of springing up from there, there are many other aspects and many other moments in a person's life that you can utilize in order to create a fuller, more interesting character that then, once you get back into your scene as your last step, you understand why and how they arrived here and what took them. And then you are that character in that scene, even though you're the one who was helping create it, it's your imagination. It feels very natural because and you're kind of embodying that that new creation. So that's why, when I talk about your method, it makes so much sense to me because it combines all of those aspects. It combines the analytical, non-judgmental approach and observation things. It combines imagination, and it combines, I'm going to use a term that some people will automatically jump on, and I don't mean it in that way, but kind of transference, right? So it's not substitution. It's transference in a way that you can be another person by helping create it. And that's why it feels natural and grounded in a scene, because it's you. It's not you, but it's you.
Because you created it. If I coached 5 different people on one role,
Yep.
Every single person would have a different take on that role, as it should be, because you're creating it through the lens of the character that you've chosen. Do your personal experiences come into play? Sure. We can't help it because this is our reference point as human beings. However, if we create an entirely new life, separate from ourselves, we're reacting not as ourselves react, but we're reacting as the character acts, and becomes easier for the actor, more fun for the actor. Because when we're kids, Alan, we play with abandonment. I'm going to be the princess and you be the handmaiden, and next I'll be the handmaiden, you be the princess, and we're going to use this stick as your magic wand, and that sort of thing. And we completely immerse ourselves in that land. We didn't care who was watching. We had this vivid world we lived in, and we're still capable of doing that. And if we create a character through emotion with detail, which is kind of the last step in the technique, we're creating the emotionally pertinent events in that child's life up until the moment of the screenplay, so that you've virtually lived it to the degree that you can. Right? So the set time becomes playtime, so that when a character opposite you, the other actor, says something to you, it's impacting you as that character would, and boy, will you feel it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's your world. It's the world that you're occupying. Another reason, and this gets into the spiritual aspect of why I love acting. But I'm going to mention some concepts, people. If you believe in them, great. If you don't believe in them, just use and put them under the imagination bucket. But for me, before I discovered your book, I kind of started creating my own method of something that I thought would work better for me, because I wanted to find something that would allow me to be grounded in my reality, to continue being natural, instead of creating a completely different person who I don't know, and I know some pieces that make sense, but others don't. And a method that kind of worked for me was saying, okay, here's me, I know me, this is my base. And here's me in an alternate reality. And this is me where, at this point in my history, I've made a different choice and I went this way. And because of that, I developed into something else. So there's still some core and some understanding of you, but you're a different version of you. So, people who love Marvel and DC, this is your alternate universes, Barry 1, Barry 2, Barry 34. So that, and from my, vantage point and my prism of spirituality, and the reason why I love acting in the first place, which I want to ask you that question too, but I love acting because it, in a way, allows me to live multiple lives during this one lifetime. Because, I'm a 45-year-old man with a wife and 2 kids. I live in Chicago. For me to say that I'm also going to be a doctor and a lawyer and a fireman and a politician and experience all these things is impossible. But if I'm an actor, it allows me that experience to a certain extent, and it allows me to know myself and to see myself from all of those perspectives, thus realizing more about who I am. So that's kind of where I came into it, and that's when I looked at your method and I saw similarities that spoke to me of saying, okay, this makes sense. I can utilize this in order to kind of fuse into your approach to create the character, still be analytical, still be in my head a little bit because I can't not be in my head all the time, and fuse it together. And that's why it speaks to me. So
thank you. I love escaping into somebody else's life.
yeah.
It's just a joy to embrace and feel what another person feels that's not you, right?
Yeah.
And because like you say, you get to be a doctor. But you get to embrace other lives, and I think that's just a joy. I think that celebrates humanity. I always say that being an actor, you're a gift into the world, because you get to reflect humanity. You also, in all the roles that you embrace,
Yeah.
you touch so many lives. Lives that people whose names you'll never know. Maybe you might comfort them through a role that you create. You might teach them something. You might give them a moment of laughter, a joy. You might make them see something about their lives that they hadn't considered before. So I just think it's such a gift unto the world. That's what actors are to me.
Thank you.
Touch lives, people you will never meet. Yeah.
Yeah. It's perfect. I have about 30 more questions for you, and I would love for you to come back, but I think this is a perfect ending place because of how you summed it up and what this really is about. And I don't want to take away from that. I'd rather kind of dive into other aspects if you at some point find some time and stuff on again for us to have more discussions. But thank you so much. I really, truly appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you working with my, rambling mind of an actor and trying to put things into their perspectives and sharing your approach with us. It helped me. I know it obviously works for incredible actors that you work with on a daily basis. And I hope it's going to work for you watching. So thank you so much.
I so appreciate you and being here as well, and thank you.
Thanks. Everybody, please, and we're going to link this book, but please go check it out. If you're in LA, go to Warner's school, and that's one thing that I regret. I'm in Chicago, so I don't get a chance to go there and work with you physically. I think you're starting to offer some virtual options. Am I correct in that?
We are indeed. We're taking a lot online now, which is great because we can reach people who can't get to LA.
Yeah, like me, I'm going to be signing up as soon as we're done with this recording. So please check it out. We're doing this all because we love acting. If we confused you, I'm sorry. If we made you think, I'm happy. And please comment, please contact, and please reach out to Warner and continue your study. Thank you, everybody.